The sun had already begun its slow crawl behind the distant horizon when Mason drove down the cracked two-lane highway, the tires of his old Chevy crunching against loose gravel that spilled from the edges of the asphalt. He hadn't meant to end up out here, not really. It had started as a road trip, a few days off work, a chance to escape the suffocating heat and dust of Dallas, but somehow, somewhere around mile marker 73, he'd missed the turn. The map on his phone had glitched, frozen on a blinking blue dot in the middle of nowhere, and the cellular signal had given out as if the land itself wanted him to vanish. Mason laughed quietly to himself, the sound hollow in the empty cab of the truck. "Nothing but desert and dead grass," he muttered, steering past a curve lined with scrub oaks that looked more like gnarled hands reaching for the sky than trees. He noticed it first out of the corner of his eye, a shadow stretching across the road, long and impossibly thin, almost like the darkness had taken form. Mason swerved, hard hammering, and caught sight of a figure standing at the edge of the asphalt. A man, or maybe something wearing the shape of a man, cloaked in black, head bowed low, just standing there. The headlights passed over him, and for a brief instant Mason thought he saw eyes white, unblinking, reflecting the light like twin moons. Then the shadow was gone. He pressed down on the gas, feeling the tires grip the road as if they were the only things tethering him to reality. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time seemed to warp out here, and the highway began to twist unnaturally. What should have been a straight stretch suddenly curved back on itself in ways that defied sense. Mason's hand shook as he gripped the wheel. The radio had started to crackle, a low static that occasionally erupted into voices whispering his name, soft and deliberate, each syllable like a finger dragging across a tombstone. He shook his head, trying to laugh it off, but the static continued, and a sense of dread coiled tight around his chest. Eventually, Mason saw a light warm yellow flickering at the edge of the road. A house, old and wooden, sagging on one corner like it had aged 100 years too quickly. Smoke curled lazily from a crooked chimney, smelling of wood and something else, something metallic that made his stomach lurch. He slowed, then stopped, the engine idling. The front door creaked open, though no breeze stirred, and he swore he saw movement inside. A figure stepped forward, a woman, tall, with hair like dark river water, wet and clinging to her face. She didn't speak but tilted her head, beckoning him. Mason felt an irrational pull, the kind that latches onto the mind when reason is weighed down by fear. As he stepped onto the creaking porch, the door slammed shut behind him. The air inside was cold, bitter in a way that no Texas night should be. Shadows stretched across the walls, moving like living things. Mason realized he couldn't see the floor-only darkness, blacker than night itself. And then he heard it, a low, rasping laugh close to his ear, as if someone or something had been breathing through the wall. He spun, but the house was empty. The woman was gone. Then the whispers came, louder now, from every corner of the room. Mason tried to back up, but the floor beneath him seemed to pulse, soft and uneven, as if the house itself were alive. Shapes coalesced from the darkness. Long limbs, faces pressed into the walls, mouths stretching impossibly wide. One of them stepped forward, taller than the doorway, eyes gleaming red like embers, teeth jagged and glinting. Mason stumbled backward, crashing into furniture that wasn't there a second ago, splintered wood cutting into his palms. He tried to run, but every exit led him deeper into a maze of hallways that shouldn't exist, rooms folding into each other like paper. The demon moved silently, always at the edge of his vision. Mason's heart pounded so violently he was sure it could be heard, and yet the whispers drowned it out, telling him secrets about his past, about sins he didn't know he'd committed, about futures he could not escape. His skin crawled as the air thickened, choking him. And then it spoke directly, its voice a hollow echo inside his own skull. You shouldn't he have come here? Mason fell to his knees, pressing his hands over his ears, trying to shut it out, but the floor beneath him shivered, then cracked, opening into a yawning void. Faces pressed through the fracture twisted, screaming, pleading, and one hand shot out, gripping his ankle with cold so sharp it burned through his jeans. He screamed, trying to pull free, but the grip tightened, dragging him toward the gaping maw of darkness. And then, suddenly, he was outside, sprawled on the gravel beside his truck. The house was gone, replaced by empty desert stretching endlessly. The sky had turned a strange, sickly green, and the wind carried whispers, faint but insistent. Mason scrambled into the cab, started the engine, and drove without looking back. The headlights caught movement in the distance. A figure, tall and dark, standing at the edge of the highway, watching, waiting. Mason floored the accelerator, the tires biting into the dirt shoulder, and the figure didn't move, didn't blink, just remained, a constant presence. By the time Mason reached the town at the next exit, hours had passed or maybe a lifetime. The streets were empty, lights flickering, and the townsfolk who did appear had eyes that seemed hollow, like they were carrying pieces of that same darkness. He tried to tell himself it was exhaustion, hallucinations, heat stroke. But the whispers followed him. At night they seeped into his dreams, reshaping them, showing him the house, the shadows, the red-eyed demon, waiting. Mason knew he could never leave it behind, not really. It was stitched into the air, into the soil of Texas, into the very blood in his veins. Years later, when he tried to warn others, no one believed him. The highway was clear, the town's welcoming, the skies normal. But Mason could see it. The long black shadow at the edge of every road, the red eyes in the dark, the house that should not exist, and the whispers that would never stop. He had become part of its story now, another name in the chorus of the damned, waiting for the next traveler who would lose their way. And he knew, deep down, that it was only a matter of time before it came for him again. The demon didn't chase. It waited, and it always won.